Thank you very much, Henry, and I'm glad to get a chance to talk to you folks. So I'm going to give a talk today. I'm a digital storage person, and that's the stuff I do. And I'm going to give a talk today on the memory of cars. And in fact, this is a picture of my first car. And I do have some fond memories of this car, a 1970 AMC Hornet. It had some problems, you had to fix it up and stuff, but that's not really what my talk is going to be about. What I'm going to talk about is storage and memory devices like these, and also how they're being used, especially being used in order to be able to enable driving assistance capabilities, automated cars, and things of that sort. So we're going to have, here's an outline of some of the stuff I'll be talking about. I'll be talking about some of the things that are driving automotive electronics and the requirements of memory. Data requirements in automotive and how that's changing as cars become essentially rolling application platforms or data centers, the different terms people have used to describe this. We'll talk about some of the various storage and memory technologies that are out there and how one can choose between one or another, or even using devices together, or things that are in data centers that are supporting your operation versus for instance, in the car itself. And then if we get time, I'll actually show you an example of storage and memory as used in a car application. In this case, it's a BMW digital radio infotainment system. So first, we'll talk about some of the drivers of automobile electronics and the memory and storage that requires. But first of all, just an observation of things that have been happening is that with a lot of the generation of unstructured, what's called unstructured data, things that aren't like databases, where you've got really tight information on what you've got. It's sort of self-indexed. It's, the data is the metadata in a sense. There's an awful lot of content out there, which is hard to, they call it unstructured because it doesn't have a good structure. It's not a lot of good information to be able to index and find stuff. And so that amount of data, that's things like Internet of Things, higher resolution video like 4K or even 8K down the road. Scientific engineering data, that sort of thing. A lot of the stuff, it takes a lot of visual information. A lot of it is vast amounts of bits, but it's finding and using this stuff is one of the challenges. And that's what's driving a lot of some of the new technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, things of this sort in order to be able to create indexable information about content so that you can find it and you can use it for various things. Now, this unstructured data, there's projections from IEEE that in 2016 there's about 16 zettabytes of information that was created. And that's a lot of bytes. That's, I think, 10 to 21. And they're projecting that can grow to 163 zettabytes of data by 2025. Now, that's kind of interesting. I know this is really too small for you to see. But of that amount, for instance, projected in 2025, probably only about 2 to 3% of all that data is going to be kept. Most of that data is meant for processing. It only has immediate value. And for instance, in a car with all the sensors and stuff, the data from those sensors has to be processed now to make real-time decisions. Okay? So there's different sorts of memory and capabilities that will support that fast processing, and then the memory you'll use for keeping stuff in the long term. And that memory is going to be in various locations. It could be local to a device, like a car. It could be what's called the edge of a network, and that's often referred to as the fog, because the stuff that's in big data centers, accessible through the internet, is called the cloud. So the fog is stuff that's closer there. And so there's a need, again, for different types of storage, memory, and capabilities. So let's talk in particular about some of the trends in automobiles. Automobiles are a lot more electric, a lot more hybrid, but in general, more electricity used in these things. They're becoming, in many regards, electronic devices, rolling application platforms. They've got more connected vehicles where they'll be able to connect with other cars, maybe through the LTE networks, for instance. And within the cars and with Wi-Fi, we'll talk more on that. So there's radios and antennas, advanced driving assistance systems that will help us to park our cars, help us to keep in the lanes, perhaps even provide some capabilities ultimately where you don't have to be driving the car all the time. And ultimately, maybe even have cars that will drive themselves. So that requires sensors, cameras, and then intelligence and programming in order to be able to analyze and use that content real time. And then infotainment and the instrument cluster, which tells you what's going on in the car. It also allows you, especially if the car is doing a lot of functions, for you to do other things. If you're working, could be entertainment. Might even include, for instance, if you're really not driving. Well, if you're driving, maybe augmented reality. If you're really not driving, virtual reality, so you can be somewhere else. Higher definition, higher dynamic range, richer color displays. And then there's even audio technologies that create sort of holographic audio experiences where one person in a car will hear something very different from what somebody else in the car will hear. Things like that are out there as well. And the electronics in general in cars, we'll talk more on this, and the electronic applications are increasing a lot. This is actually a slide from Clemson University. I'm not going to go over all this huge list of things that are being done now with electronics in cars. And cars are part of what's often referred to as the Internet of Things. This basic concept has been around a long time. People have made smart connected stuff for at least a couple of decades now. But the name right now, and there's a lot of hype around this, is the Internet of Things. It's actually being used a lot now in modern factories, Factory 4.0, where we're building manufacturing facilities where all the manufacturing equipment has sensors, a lot of robotics being used, and a lot of artificial intelligence, machine learning, for instance, going on in the background in order to optimize these factories. One of the places you're going to be using this is in cars. So the basic idea is that I've got, as the price of processing goes down, as I got more capable processing that I can put in smaller packages, and as I can get more connectivity, that I can, and lower cost sensors, all these together allow us to create devices and systems that have intelligence, that have knowledge of the world around them, and that can communicate that the information they gather from that data from the world around them to other devices and to other systems. So the convergence of that ubiquitous processing and networking, this whole thing together, is often called the Internet of Things. And cars are an important part of that. And the value of some of these capabilities we're talking about in cars, and you might have heard some of the numbers, but they're very huge. If I could have a half-second warning, you can avoid about 60% of all road collisions. And if you had a full second warning in any situation, you could avoid about 90%. So the cost in terms of property damage and loss of life and injuries, from this kind of thing is actually very, very large, you might imagine. Insurance companies, one of the sort of organizations that really will be driving the demand for these kind of things. They require a lot of infrastructure on the networking capabilities, building things on the edge to be able to deal with that data. It allows us to do intelligent maintenance. We'll talk about sensors built into things like tires and things like that can actually give you real-time information about what's going on. And it allows us to create new capabilities and features, the self-driving capabilities and other things as well. These things look like they're going to be enormous drivers of demand for automobiles in the future. People like these things. Those that already have some of these features in their cars find them very attractive. So this is going to be driving our demand and need for these things. We really want these because of the things that they provide for us. And anyway, so projections are for 152 million connected cars on the road by 2020. This is actually a slide from Intel, as you can see there. And the Society of Automotive Engineers has created a sort of different levels of driving automation that they're talking about. Starting off with level 0, which is basically what I did in my 1970 AMC Hornet, which is I did everything. And then you have things where you have adaptive cruise control, maybe some lane keeping, driver alertness, and that's called level 1. So I call it longitudinal lateral control. And there's level 2, which there are some capabilities out there now. Adaptive cruise, lane keeping, parking assistance, some help with traffic jams. And level 3 is where essentially some cars, like some of the Teslas and stuff, are starting to create capabilities in those areas, where driver control with transition only when needed. Okay, so you're assuming that the car is going to be doing a lot of the driving, especially if you're on a highway or something like that, where there's more or less predictable transitions happening. It's a little bit easier to do these things. Highway piloting, for instance, where you may have commercial vehicles like trucks that would be basically autonomous vehicles running on the highways. maybe have the driver there, but they're not needed to drive the car. The car is actually a platoon in order to reduce the wind resistance, and a whole bunch of them will go down the road together. Basically, a bunch of robots going down the road together. These are the kind of things we're talking about here. So we're just starting to move into this level 3 on new sort of vehicles. And then we get into sort of the nirvana of these technologies. Level 4 is high degree of automation, where basically the car is driving itself unless there's some extreme situation it doesn't know what to do. Now the interesting thing about that, of course, is if you're not paying attention, you won't know what to do either. So, that's it's kind of an interesting netherworld you got when you get this transition going from the fully manual to fully autonomous. And then finally level 5, where basically there is no steering wheel. There is no capability to drive the car. The car is intended to drive itself. So these 5 levels that they've created. And the interesting thing about these capabilities, both commercial and consumer sort of values people get from this. For instance, consumers can get on-demand and streaming content of various sorts, weather, sports, TV shows if you're not driving, etc. Email, you can do your email, social activities, you can payment systems. You can get driver alerts, especially if you got this connected to infrastructure that's tied into a smart city, where it can give you alerts of what's going on, anticipated problems, help you to change your routes or to do things you want to do. Recommendations on where to park, where to get the best fuel, things of that sort, again, so you can help to plan the most efficient trips you can. If you get in trouble, it can automatically call for help. Say you have a heart attack while you're driving, the car will take itself off the road and call for help. Those kind of things we could be expecting. And then the roadside assistance, and if your car is stolen, to help it be found quickly and resolve that. And then the various sorts of alerts, which could be, again, tying this into this idea that the car is only a part of a larger infrastructure that includes cities which have intelligence and communication built into them. And on the enterprise side, there's some real interesting things where you can do fleet maintenance, analysis of what's going on with individual vehicles, and very interesting ideas. For instance, that you only pay for insurance as you use the car, use the vehicle. So basically, pay-as-you-go insurance. Instead of paying a flat fee, you just pay it as you use the vehicle. And then various sorts of promotion, and electronic tolling, things like that as well. And a large part of this, especially the communication side of these vehicles, is going to be wireless networks of various sorts. It may be 4G, 5G, 5G with higher speed. Connectivity is supposed to be available sometime in the next decade, which is external communication to the edge or to the internet, or for larger networks, cloud infrastructure. Wi-Fi used probably primarily for in-vehicle communication between devices, whether it be your own personal devices or within the car. Bluetooth for connection to your personal connectivity devices like a headphone or things of that sort, or speaker. And then RFID, which has been around for a while, is very low-cost radio. Often passives could be active as well. That might, for instance, be used to get data from your tires to tell you what's going on with them while you're driving along. In fact, the RFID in cars, they use key fobs used for toll payments. And here's an example. This is Formula E racing, but I also talked recently to somebody in Formula F racing. So E is the electric and F is the traditional combustion engine racing, where they actually have sensors built into the tires that can sense the wear, can sense the pressure, temperature, etc. And it tells you how it's being used, how it's being exercised, when you should replace it, especially if you're in a race condition, but even for ordinary use conditions. And with more work on the intelligence, say machine learning, the tire potentially could even tell you, okay, I've suddenly gone from a hard asphalt surface and I'm on ice. Right, I'm going on a bridge, it's winter, and all of a sudden it's frozen, some water's frozen on there. It can tell you that automatically, and if it's a connected car, it can tell all the cars behind you, well, there's some ice patch on the bridge up here. So real-time interesting information that these things can do, again, there's wireless communicating networks. Now, again, I'm a storage guy, so you're doing all this processing, but you're going to keep stuff in various places. And some things are going to stay in the car. And the car is, of course, embedded in the fog, because that's the local edge networks, right? So you're also going to have stuff the fog, or maybe your local infrastructure, call that a smart city. And then you've got stuff that's in a large data center that's going to be available through the internet. That's the cloud. And the fog stuff may or may not communicate with the cloud. It's definitely communicating with local devices. In fact, if you look at, well, here's another slide here in the cloud. The fog, here we go, is data centers, right? Racks and racks, a controlled environment. You're trying to keep things from getting too hot. And so that's big computing resources, storage, GPU, racks of GPUs, and servers and various things. And the fog is the thing that's on your street corner. It's the edge networks, which generally don't have good environmental controls. So whatever the weather is like, they have to deal with that. And that's what a lot of that infrastructure communication, the smart city type communication will be to interact with vehicles. And it may or may connect with the internet. It definitely will connect between different types of devices. Okay, so here's the fog, that's big data centers. Here's the edge, here's the cloud, the big data center. Here's the fog, local networks that may connect consumer devices, they connect cars and other devices, computer, etc. Again, giving us different levels of connectivity, different places where we're going to keep certain information, process information. They have different latencies. I've got a higher latency to go from here to here to the cloud than I would from going from, say, fog to here, or where I have to do some processing, for instance, in the car. You're going to do different levels of things depending upon the needs for performance and latency. And here's, again, moving into some ideas of what people are going to be doing with this, where here is your edge. That's your fog right there. Here's my car. My car's got communications, communicating with the edge. That edge may have sensors, for instance, built into cameras and other types of sensors might be built into the infrastructure there that can communicate to the edge network. The edge network then consolidates that information, makes real-time decisions. There's cars coming the other direction, what speed are they going at? Or there's a bicycle that's coming off the street, and communicate that to the guy that's coming up here, or to his car at least, so that the car or the person can anticipate a potential issue and deal with it. Those are the kind of things that we need. And there are projects going on here at the U.S. Department of Transportation projects where they're looking at next generation connected vehicles. And these yellow things are supposed to be radio waves. And so they're communicating with each other with local infrastructure to make decisions. And IEEE is involved, especially in wireless communication technologies. IEEE is involved in many of the standards around this, especially these things related to 802 type standards, but others as well. They also have new standards, for instance, with autonomous and automated driving that they're working on, this P2040 series. And so they've got various standards, a lot of communication, some of them on autonomous vehicles that they're working on. So I'm sort of represent the IEEE. It's a good reason to be part of the IEEE, or at least to work with IEEE folks, because that's the standards we work on. And if you're doing something in the automotive environment, it has very stringent requirements. You're working in environments that can be extreme. They can be going all the way from -40 to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're working with well over 100 degrees. They've got to last for maybe 10 years or longer lifetime, because that's what people require in their cars. You have to be able. It's going to take a long time to do a qualification for the cars in general, because they take a long time to get certification, safety, and everything else done in these things. They have to be in terms of memory devices. So here's part of the thing: it has to be instant boot, because I don't want to have to wait for my car to boot. Right? I want to get in. I want to drive with it. I've got to have data that's on the devices in the car that have to keep that data for at least 5 years. And I'm going to do a lot of cycling of that data, well, a combination of both random and sequential access to information that I've got to deal with. Now, some interesting things are being done with this. This was actually shown at the NVIDIA CPU conference in 2016, but actually earlier this year I saw that they were starting to show up in the Formula E races. This is an autonomous race car that NVIDIA put their name on. Okay, and there was the Formula E race apparently earlier this year, but they were starting to show up here. And NVIDIA is one of the companies that's been working on these things. One of the things that they were talking about was the idea called sensor fusion. An automobile has a ton of sensors on it. radar, LiDAR, potential sensors, radar, LiDAR, cameras, a lot of them, okay? And combining all the information together in order to make intelligent decisions is called sensor fusion. So this was their version of sensor fusion, is Drive PX. Fuse data from 12 cameras, LiDAR, radar, ultrasonic sensors. Just try to get a 360-degree environmental view of what's going on around the car. So that static as well as dynamic objects, they're using deep neural networks in order to analyze this data and make decisions based upon all these things. So it has to learn from how to understand all this sensor data together. So a lot of the things that are being done here are with these sensor fusion, and probably true of any other applications of sustainability as well, doing more and more with a lot more ways of sensing and understanding our environment to be able to make real-time decisions. So let's talk now on some of the data requirements in automobiles. Talk a bit about some of the drivers, things that are going on. By the way, if you, just like in combustion engines, doing something in a racing environment is a lot more severe than doing it on a regular road. So you learn a lot from doing these things. That's part of the reason why people do it. Now let's talk about the requirements for automobiles, particularly moving into these smart automobiles. And first of all, what does IoT data look like? Okay. So I've got a network device, it might be a sensor. That the data from that device may be small in itself, but what really gives value to the data is what's called the metadata. And so the whole data set is the data plus it's got the metadata. The metadata may be telling you things like what time it is I've taken this data, has the data changed from its last measurement to this measurement, where was it located, and that actually can add enormous value to the data, make it actually useful, but also increase the total size of the data set. And understanding controlling metadata may also potentially, because it tells so much about you and what you're doing in this vehicle, for instance, this could be a big part of ensuring personal privacy content in cars. So let's take an example for like raw piece of data coming off of a sensor like a thermometer, maybe associated with 100 bytes of metadata. The metadata, again, time, location information, tells you what the sensor device is, how old it is, has something changed from the last measurement to this measurement, things of that sort. You know, how has data been changing over time? These things create more value in that data. They increase the total amount of data required. But storage is cheap. Everybody's getting cheaper, so you want to do this as best you can. And if you look at some of these requirements in cars, some of the stuff people are talking about, Google autonomous cars generate about 1 gigabyte of data per second with all of the LiDAR and cameras, etc. Average U.S. driver drives about 600 hours per year, and so that would generate about 2 petabytes per car per year of data. Okay, and the number of cars worldwide will exceed a billion. So the personal science of the data we're talking about here, generated by these cars, by a fleet of all autonomous cars, would be humongous. So again, this is the amount of data generated. Most of this data needs to be processed and used real time. A little bit of it will be saved, or a little bit of the resulting data will be saved. But there's different types, again, of capabilities we need for processing the data and for keeping the long-term results. And the storage, this thing generating that storage requirement, again, you've got radar, cameras, ultrasonic, LiDAR. You've got, say, right around now, you've got about 10-meter resolution on the GPS, on most navigation systems. 2020 plus, the requirement may be more like a 10-centimeter resolution in order to help these cars stay on the road. But you need to have a GPS that's much better sensitivity, more data, more refined data information on things. And in general, looking at some of these memory trends in automobiles, the electrical share of automobiles, even the state-of-the-art internal combustion engine, is roughly 40%. And if you move into an electric car, hybrid or electric car, you have to as high as 75% right now. You still have mechanical components. There's an awful lot of electronics, signal processing, and other capabilities being built into these. And the total available market for automotive, that's not me, must be quartered. For semiconductor memories in automotive applications, is expected to be well above what's called the cumulative annual growth rate for other applications. This is a very fast-growing memory market. And automobiles are about 5% currently of the memory market, but in the next few years that's expected to increase to 10%. Now that's the semiconductor memory market in particular we're talking about there. So what are some of the things we're doing with memory? Well, 3D maps, right? It's not just, I'm driving and where's the roads are. It's like satellite information. It's three-dimensional topographies, things of that sort. So getting real 3D representations of where you're at. Real-time capture of data. Black box recorders, which have been mandated in cars in the U.S. for several years now, which will basically record information and presumably have that data be available if there's an accident with it, to debug what happened. Onboard 4K video content. If you're not driving, you've got to do something. And all these things are looking at projections to greater than 1 terabyte of capacity in a car by about 2020. No cars available at that time. That's an additional storage in local and remote networks. So all the stuff in the edge and the fog and in the cloud that can help support cars and this whole infrastructure of cars. And I met this from this month, a few of these here are from the Micron talk at the Flash Memory Summit. The amount of memory content per car is now getting above $100 worth of memory built in these cars, and as we move into higher levels of automation, it's level 5 there sometime. They're saying 2025 or so. We'll see. That it becomes even higher amount of the actual values built into these vehicles. And some of the things that the memory is being used for, this is the code storage, okay? The code that makes the thing work. Projections that the amount of DRAM density, that's the actual storage capacity, and the amount of code increasing demands going to say here from 210 to 215 out to 2018. And at the same time, it's increasing the prices, presumably going down, and the performance is going up, and the power requirements is going down as well. But a lot is because of movements to the low power DRAM and things of that sort, which can support these environments. And that was the code. This is actual content. This would be like your movies, your music, your maps, things of that sort. And so those requirements also are increasing. That this is the actual capacities available, that people are using here. So we're looking at, again, these devices could be 500, closing on 500 gigabytes in 2018. And again, we talked before, this could double again that by about 2020 or so, dealing with all these requirements, especially with the automated driving assistance, etc. So those are some of the things that are going on in terms of requirements in cars. Talked a bit about this, what's driving this market, some of the requirements in cars. Now we'll look at some of the storage devices and some ways of viewing storage devices, how you choose what device, and then look at the individual devices. So just to get started in this, there's a white paper that another fellow, myself, an IBM fellow, and I did on, we call it touch rate versus response time. The touch rate, if I've got a storage device, how often can I touch all the data on the device within a given period of time? So this is, for instance, how many times I can touch, write, or read, for instance, all the data on the device in a year's time. That's what that vertical axis is. It's a log scale. And then on the horizontal axis, it's the response time. From when I give a command to a storage device to when that command is completed, it's ready to do another command. That's the response time. They have that plotted on a horizontal axis in again, on a log scale. So as you move from left to right horizontally, you get faster performance. Okay. As you move from lower to upper, you get more accessibility to the data on the device. Okay. So and then we have different sorts of operations you might do with this. I've got very high availability, all the data on the device, and a very fast response time. So that's a high input-output operations per second operation. Below that, we've got the signal calling transactional, where it's a little bit more relaxed on both of that. And then nearline, okay, a lot of data in, say, data center, that sort of, they say it's nearline data. It's a little bit lower, slower to get to the data, and I might not be able to get to all of it as fast as I might with other devices. Then what's called semi-active, cold archive, and then inactive. Now, everyone would love to have something that would be highly responsive, that I can get to the data instantly, that I can get to all the data very quickly, okay? Except usually costs more money. This is like the cache memory in computers up here. This is like flash memory. In fact, if we look at things, the next slide, we're actually overlaying different storage devices here. So flash, cache, and that sort of memory is up here, And I have my flash, which is provides some of the high output capability, and in the transaction processing, because I want to generally operate here if I get at the need, or I get the best compromise between response time and the touch rate. And what's called performance hard drives are in this range here, and capacity hard drives, which a lot of data center is in this range here, which basically is an nearline storage, and then things like magnetic tape in this inactive area. So this is the expensive stuff. These are less expensive going down this way. The things I need to process fast are probably going to be with that fast cache memory, or with, say, things like flash memory. If I want to keep things for a long time at lower cost, people keep it in the hard drive. So for instance, you may have storage devices and systems may use combinations of different storage in them. So before we get into the actual device, I just want to give one way of looking at these, at how we choose things. And the raw cost of storage, although the other thing is the total cost of ownership, all the things you do, but the raw cost of raw storage with SSDs and hard drives, it looks like it's probably going to stay at about a 10x ratio for at least some time to come. And so it's something to keep in mind. You do want some fast memory, but you may not want to have all the fast memory. And now in automobiles, here's some storage device examples for different sorts of things that people use, including flash, DRAM, connectivity and containment. Actually, a lot of those right now, which are hard disk drive based, because this is inexpensive for storing movies and things that sort. Your instrument cluster, automated drive assistance capabilities, powertrain, black box. Apparently, we're using EEPROMs for that. And then if I have some kind of a digital video recorder function, where I can record everything that happens, if I get an accident, I've got a recording of things, that needs a hard drive or various types of flash memory, for example. And then looking at individual devices themselves, there actually are hard disk drives that are built for automobiles. And both Toshiba and the next one I'll show is from IGESSC, which is part of Western Digital. These are 2.5-inch drives that built for the auto market. They have capacities up to 320 gigabytes and 976 megabit per second sustained data rate, seek time of 12 milliseconds. They can handle temperatures from -22 to 185 in operation, from -40 to 203 during non-operation. That's pretty impressive for a hard drive. Plus, they can operate up to over 18,000 foot elevations, which is higher than any city that people live in. And it withstand shock up to 3 Gs. And so it's a very inexpensive way. And you'll see later the example here how much these things may cost compared to flash memory. Here's the IGESSC, again, the division of Western Digital, now a version of that, again, 320 gigabytes, 5,500 meter altitude, -30 to 85 centigrade, and the SATA interface devices. So that's the hard drives. Okay. And just so you can get an idea, here's something from the Advanced Storage Technology roadmap, which is a roadmap organization for hard disk drives. And here's their projections. Current costs are shipping about 1.3 terabits per square inch of areal density on the surface of the disk. The projections of the technology can take us out to at least 10 times, or roughly 10 times that. That means that today's 10 terabyte hard drive could be a 100 terabyte hard drive in 2025. And that's projected going from what's called perpendicular magnetic recording today, perhaps including things where they partially overwrite tracks on top of each other. It's called chain recording. But that has limited use. Most of them you just write once. The things that are really going to be driving it are what's called energy-assisted magnetic recording, which may be this heat-assisted recording using lasers to heat the media, or WD just announced by next year they're going to start sampling parts. They're using microwave-assisted magnetic recording, where they're using microwaves built into the gap of the write heads in order to be able to write very high-density information. And combine that then with central writing on single-domain spots on the disk surface with these energy-assisted technologies. That's the path that they think they can increase by 10 times the capacity of a hard drive now, probably at the same price for the hard drive. So that's hard drives. Now let's look at flash memory and other solid-state devices. So here's some various flash memory devices here, all the way from cards to vulgar array devices to actual SSDs of various sorts. Some examples in the auto industry, and I should have pointed out that with hard disk drives, as well as flash memory, in order to keep the kind of requirements under the operational conditions that cars must operate, will have to sacrifice generally on their capacity in order to provide the robustness. in the case of flash memory, for instance, the data retention requirements. So they could be higher capacity, but they aren't, because they're pulling back the capacity in order to make other things more robust with the device. So here we've got an SD card here with 64 gigabyte capacity. You can go out there and buy 256 gigabyte capacity cards now, for 128 of these. And also some automotive grade SSDs. This is the SanDisk, now part of Western Digital device here. They also have a wall grid array version that's called an IGESSC. And then here's some Micron SSDs built for automobile applications. Now here is a flash memory roadmap. Flash memory has gone from the planar technologies that are still, but on the verge of changing the bulk of the market right now, to building flash memory that actually has the memory cells that are stacked on top of each other. They call that a 3D flash. So we've got the major transitions, which will more than 50% of all the flash memory will be 3D flash by next year. That will also reduce the price of flash memory from it increased like double last year to this year because of shortages, demand versus supply. More supply will be out there with 3D flash next year. We should see it dropping in price. But we also see here that this multi-cell flash memory, the stacked flashes are moving from 48 and falling down to 64, and projection in 92, 96 layered flash was announced in August of this year. The expectation by next year, the year after that, you could be seeing move into say 120 or higher level cells, which could be several hundred level cells, at least according to research, things people have done in labs. And this again is looking at the 2D to 3D flash, or I take a planar flash, and the word bit lines now I create a 3D structure to be able to address the pages of memory inside the flash memory device. And this has allowed people to relax on lithographic size of things, which was limiting how far the planar could go, and be able to make much higher capacity devices. So in addition to flash memory, there's other interesting memory technologies that are out there as well. This is a magnetic random access memory device here. The interesting thing about magnetic random access memory, especially the latest generation of the spin tunnel torque devices, is actually a performance which is like that of DRAM and SRAM. They have speeds which are like that, and they're non-volatile versus DRAM and even SRAM. So they can retain memory when the power goes off. So Everspin is a company that has been pioneering that. They went public last year. They have a deal with a company called Global Foundries that actually makes the 300 millimeter wafers, CMOS wafers that they use. They use them for standalone MRAM devices, and Global Foundries is building embedded devices. And Global Foundries in particular has been introducing MRAM meant for caching and buffering applications in embedded applications, including automobiles. So the interesting possibilities here. And probably by next year we're going to see MRAMs available from Samsung, Toshiba, and a number of other companies as well, according to their recent announcements. So if you'd like, I can show you one quick example of use of storage. Okay, I've got one out over there. Use of storage in this case, an infotainment application, which is one of the biggest total capacity capabilities in a car. And it's a BMW i3 digital radio. So this is actually data from Tech Insights. They did a tear down here. There's a hard drive, and there's a motherboard. There's some boards there with memory on them. The total cost breakdown for the radio, the rest of the system was about 89% of the cost. The memory about 5%, the hard disk drive in there was about 6%. So altogether it's about 11% of the total cost. And here's first looking at the boards here, and you can see that so this is the main board, one side of the main board, and there are different memory devices that are on here. There's some flash memory, there's other types of memory here too. And in fact, if we look at the schematic of the motherboard, here's the hard disk drive, so there's a bus there, and then we can see there's various memories that are being used. EEPROM memory here, I think there's some flash memory there. Here's some flash here, some more flash there as well that are being used in this device. And here in particular is the hard disk drive. This is a 200 gigabyte Toshiba hard disk drive. It's one of those drives that come up before. They're estimating that the cost of that thing is about $29 for 200 gigabytes, which is going to be a lot less than flash. Okay, that's the reason why people are choosing this. And so that's an application. And in conclusion, future cars will generate more data than ever before. It's part of this whole trend for Internet of Things, for this vast amount of unstructured data that low-cost processing, sensors, and connectivity are making possible. The connectivity and the ADAS are going to have interesting implications in terms of the memory and operation of these cars, and the storage requirements, and where it's stored at. Is it local? Is it going to be at the edge? You know, is it going to be in the cloud, and the coordination of data between those things? They're going to be local cars are going to be part of local networks, and also there'll be wireless networks within the cars themselves. We'll have a lot of radios running on cars, and essentially cars will be even more electronic than they are today. And the memory and storage requirements, we believe, is going to be moving eventually, probably all solid state as the price goes down, depending upon the requirements there. And including new types of solid state memories such as MRAM. And on the other hand, the data that's especially going to be in those clouds, big data centers, because the cost of storage, magnetic storage, and these high performance hard disk drives now available for 14 terabytes, probably 40 terabytes by 2025, are going to be where a lot of the stuff ultimately might be stored in. So with that, just some references, and thank you very much, and we'll take any questions. Yes, Henry. Sorry, walk away from the microphone.
So what's the major difference between the memory of automobile to the regular memory we have in the computer?
The biggest difference is going to be in the specifications for that memory. The memory, so for instance, my phone, my cell phone, I'm going to keep in my pocket generally or inside with me. So it's not going to, even though I may take it outside, even though I may be in a cold place, it's not going to be so cold generally. You don't shut itself down if it is. But a car is supposed to be operating when it's minus 20 degrees outside or over 100 degrees. And so my memory has to store there. So what I was trying to refer to that earlier, what people do is they can make trade-offs between, say, the storage capacity and its robustness in temperatures and things of that sort. So the specifications of a automotive memory device, whether it be a hard disk drive or flash memory, whatever it's going to be, or even that MRAM, it's going to be different than what it would be for devices not meant to be in such rugged conditions. Other questions? Yes.
And thank you, Louis, for the great presentation on the car. So I have a question about the cybersecurity. But with the car becomes more smarter and they talk to each other, then how the cybersecurity is smart car different than the other industries, and what is special consideration in this side?
Well, it's different, but it also is the same. There have been people who hacked cars in their driving systems, the demonstrations of that. So building in encryption and secure communications is going to be a big part of, making things that people are going to feel that they can trust, and which, at least with consumer devices up to this point, there's been less attention paid to the security than not. It's paid to the security than it should have been paid to it. But I think that's going to change. It's going to have to change in order for people to feel comfortable with these things. For one thing, it's going to give, if anyone can get access to information, they can tell when you're not at home, because your car will tell them, or they can cause an accident with your car, things of that sort. So it's going to be crucial to be able to do that. I think there's a couple of ways in which that can happen. One, which is data at rest, that is within storage or memory devices in the vehicle. And there's self-encrypting technologies actually built into most SSDs and pretty much all hard disk drives at this point, which, if enabled, will allow you to have an encryption key that's kept on the storage device, but you can only access it if you have a password to get that. So it never goes over the wire. So that could be one part of that. And then the data in motion is the other part. That's where actual encryption with proper keys of data as it moves back and forth, or moves between the car and the edge, for instance, will be an important part of that. Yes. Thank you.
I have a question about how forgiving consumer devices are compared to using those in a car compared to what I might find is built into the car. I've got a flash drive with my music on it.
Right.
I plug it into the car.
I leave it in the car. If it gets fried, I toss it, buy another, $4 USB fee.
Mhm.
So the question is, how forgiving are these devices that are used in these extreme conditions?
Well, if it's built into the car and it's part of that original manufacturer, it has to meet the requirement of lasting 10 years with data retention of at least 5 years. So and again, this gets down to the specsmanship of these devices. Those reliability and life considerations change what the specifications could be and what they could be if it was just a consumer device used at room temperature.
Yeah, well, my car just has a USB port to plug in. I use it.
Yes.
And I just leave it there all the time.
Sure, but you should realize that the crappiest flash memory goes into those USB sticks. And do not store your memory on that, put it in a safety deposit box, and you're going to get back 10 years from now. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. If I remember well, the Google car is about 2 gigabytes per second or per hour.
2 gigabyte, 1 gigabyte per second is the number.
Per second. And what is the main contribution to this? Is this the LiDAR or more the
Cameras.
and the camera?
4K cameras, a bunch of them. Video generates so much data. Yeah. But everything contributes to that.
Okay.
So I have seen lots of slides that the 2020 is a landmark for many different things.
Yeah, it's less than 3 years away now.
Yeah. That's what I have a question about the autonomous car. So how much autonomous the car will be by 2020?
I think you may have a place like Singapore, right? Maybe they would do autonomous cars or something, maybe like regulated to make it happen. They do that, right? So I think we may have some spot things where people are doing things that are, more autonomous. And I think there's going to be some commercial vehicles that will have autonomous functions. I think in general for most of the world that most cars will have driving assistance capabilities, fairly sophisticated ones, but not full autonomy. I don't think we'll be at level 5 by 2020 for sure, for almost everything, unless it's a really controlled environment.
2025 maybe.
Yeah, maybe give another 5 years.
Thank you.
Or more. Well, thank you all.